Okay, welcome everyone to this capacity building session about environmental management. I would like to welcome you all. And I would like to introduce Mr. 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐞𝐞𝐧, who is the Secretary General of MedCities, and he's also a biologist, ecologist, and an urban planner. So, Giuseppe, whenever you want.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Can you hear me well? Is okay, the sound, image? Okay,
Yeah.
Gemma, the sound
Yes.
and image, okay. Thank
Perfect.
you very much. Thank you to all the attendees. Thank you very much for being here from Barcelona. Bonjour, Masa khair. I'm very glad to have you here, and thank you for being here with us. And thank you also to Gemma Torres, the lead of this project for us, and all the staff at the General Secretariat for this amazing cycle of sessions, of capacity sessions. For us, for MedCities, it's very important, this cycle of sessions, because I think it's the first time that the organization is providing a cycle of sessions for the whole universe of members. And we think that this is very important because this is one of the very reasons, one of our raisons d'être, of our very existence, to help our members, to help them to strengthen their capacities and skills, both political and technical, from both sides of the coin, for saying it so. The political staff, the political representatives need to understand better what is happening in the main trends of all the matters or the areas that we want to tackle in these sessions, and of course the technical staff for having the solutions, the concrete and specific solutions for these areas. And this is very important also because these sessions are the result of a demand of the mayors, of your mayors, all the mayors of the MedCities, in our General Assembly, in a democratic parliament, our democratic parliament, our General Assembly, which is the place where all the mayors expose their preoccupations. One of them was how we we could provide some more knowledge upon the matters that you need to solve: urban mobility, environmental management, energy efficiency, and I forgot the fourth one.
Solid waste management.
Waste management, of course, waste management. Thank you, Gemma. And it's very important for us. We are very happy to have you here. First session today, the first cycle for environmental management. I think it's very important to get to know that we are in our Mediterranean region, and according to the last report of the experts on the Mediterranean panel of experts, our region is suffering more than the global average. 20% is worse, the effects of the climate crisis, about 20% worse than the global average. So, and you know that because we can suffer drought, more frequent droughts and rainfalls, more extreme periods from cold and hot. So we need to tackle that, and from the cities, from the municipalities, from the villages, this is the main places where we can address these issues. So it's very important to get to know what are the main trends and solutions in this regard to make the cities more livable. Because we know that concrete is not the solution, is green the solution for the city. So the mayors and the cities need, the mayors want to provide more green, more livable public spaces, and all is what is in this regard. So nature-based solutions are the solutions that cities need for making more livable, more enjoyable and less polluted. So these are the sessions that we are going to start today. So just to wish you a fruitful first session and the whole cycle of sessions, and hope that this will be, as I said, very fruitful to you. Thank you very much again for being here. MedCities, as you know, is at your service, so we hope this will be very fruitful to you. Thank you very much.
Yes, so Gemma, if it's okay, I will start then myself. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐿𝐵𝐵 𝐵𝐵, and I'm gonna be presenting today the session of today and also next week. So let me share my screen right now. So we have prepared a presentation that hopefully is useful for you, as Josep was saying, regarding environmental management in your city. So first of all, as I said, my name is Silvia, and as you probably know, this environmental training block will have 3 online sessions starting today. Today, the session is gonna be about challenges, the threats of climate change and other environmental threats that unfortunately, I'm sure all of you are very aware of them already. And the second session will be next week about, we will be showing specific nature-based solutions examples and case studies in the Mediterranean cities. So other cities that have implemented projects like this that can be of inspiration for you and your cities to also implement. And then finally, in the last session, we will all together try to find solutions to a specific case. So with all the knowledge that hopefully you have gathered in the first 2 sessions, we will apply it in a practical case, so you can maybe see more the application in your city. And basically, as Josep was also saying, the overall goal of this environmental management training block is to provide you as municipalities with an insight on the benefits and possibilities that using nature-based solutions and other environmental tools as well can bring you, and to increase the knowledge on the wide range of different types of nature-based solutions that we will also see today, and what is their impact in also energy usage and air pollution and resilience against climate change and other environmental threats, and also all the co-benefits, very important co-benefits that these solutions also provide. So this is the agenda. I've already mentioned a little bit, basically talking about the environmental impacts that is threatening the Mediterranean cities, also how we can manage these threats and use it as opportunities to increase resilience. We will also talk about the financing possibilities. So what sources of financing you can have, which is also sometimes a tricky point. And finally, we will also talk about the key role of citizens and other stakeholders in communication and implementation of these nature-based solutions, as well as other environmental actions. And finally, we will have a little bit of a discussion and closure. So before I start talking about the Mediterranean environmental impacts and threats, we would like to hear from you already now, and here you can use the chat to let us know, first of all, what climate change impacts or other environmental impacts you believe are the most significant for your region or city. And also, if you have heard of the term nature-based solution before. I'm sure many of you have, but we just want to know if all of you have heard of this term before. So you can use the chat to let us know about this, and hopefully my colleagues can also let me know with some of the answers, if I can see the screen again. But please let us know what are the climate change and environmental impacts that you think are the most significant, or that you are already suffering the most. And if you have heard of this term, nature-based solution, and if you know some types Jem, Alicia, I can't seem to see the chat, so I don't know if you are.
Yes, for the moment, nobody
good.
saying anything.
It's just because I couldn't see the chat.
Yeah, we will let you know, Sylvia.
Perfect. So yeah, we're sure that unfortunately many of you are aware of and are suffering already many of these threats and environmental impacts in your cities. So yeah, if you can let us know maybe the most significant one or the one that you think it's a priority to tackle, or several of them. And now I can see the chat and I can see some comments.
Can you see it, Sylvia? Yeah?
Yes, yeah, now I can see it, thank you. Yeah, like change of precipitation patterns. Ghassan is saying raising temperature affecting agricultural crops and irrigation. And from Nabul Komun, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, sorry. They say yes, so probably they have heard of the terms nature-based solutions. And drought as well. Flooding, erosion. Pollution as well, municipal solid waste from Zarka. Flying dust and smoke from factories and cars. You can also see. Right. Marine intrusion. So a lot of diversity and problems, and unfortunately, some repeating ones are the increase in temperature differences and flooding. But yeah, definitely several threats that the Mediterranean region is suffering. Well, thank you for your answers. You can keep answering if you want, but we'll have other opportunities to hear from you, because we really want to hear from your experience and yeah, what you're suffering. So if that's okay, we will start with this first part of the session. If there's any comments, Gemma and Alicia, that you think that I should be aware, because now I don't see the chat again, you let me know. Right, so to start with the main threats of that we are suffering in Mediterranean cities, virtually all subregions of the Mediterranean basin on land and in sea are impacted by the recent anthropogenic changes in the environment. The main drivers, as you probably know, are climate change, and that includes some of the impacts that you were mentioning now. So increase in temperature, change in precipitation patterns, atmospheric circulation, extreme events, sea level rise, seawater temperature increase, and salinity and acidification increase. But then there's other non-climatic impacts, which are or not climate-driven impacts, which are population increase, increase in pollution and sustainable land use and sea use practices, as well as increase in non-indigenous species. And due to these global and regional trends in the drivers, well, impacts will be even more increased than now in the coming decade, especially if global warming exceeds 1.5 to 2 degrees above the pre-industrial level. That, as you know, is our goal right now, to not exceed this, because then the impacts would be even more extreme and impacting. So significantly enhanced efforts are needed in order to adapt to these unavoidable changes that we will suffer, and we are already suffering, and to mitigate change drivers and increase resilience. Here I'm showing you, Josep mentioned it in his speech before, this report, the first Mediterranean assessment report. Probably many of you are aware of it. It's the climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean basin, the current situation and risks in the future, which I welcome you to also have a look at, even though, again, unfortunately, we are very familiar with all of these impacts and threats already. This report was prepared by the Independent Network of Mediterranean Experts on Climate and Environmental Change, MEDEC, and it's written by almost 190 scientists from 25 different countries. And this report assesses the best available scientific knowledge on climate and environmental change and the associated risks in the Mediterranean basin, in order to render it accessible to policymakers, stakeholders, and citizens. And as you might also know, this report also includes a summary for policymakers, which can be relevant to you as well. And it comprises the key messages of this assessment. So regarding the climate change drivers and threats, anthropogenic climate change has been observed for many variables in the Mediterranean basin during recent decades. And for the future, the region is expected to remain among the regions that are most affected by climate change, and particularly when it comes to precipitation and hydrological cycle, which you were also mentioning in the chat, some of you. Regarding temperature, there is robust evidence that the Mediterranean region has significantly warmed already, and projections for the future in 2040, the regional temperature increase could be of 2.2 degrees with the current policies. But if we look at the different scenarios, so as you can see in the graphs, the picture with the letter B, it's the more optimistic scenario. And here warming would be from 0.9 to 1.5 degrees Celsius increase from pre-industrial levels. But in the picture with the letter C, so down on the right side, that you see it's very green, that's because unfortunately this more pessimistic scenario is projecting increases of 3.7 to 5.6 degrees Celsius increase compared to pre-industrial levels. So very different scenarios, and no matter what, some of the impacts will affect no matter what. And as Judith was also mentioning before, the Mediterranean region is warming 20% faster than the global average. So the Mediterranean basin is definitely one of the most impacted in this sense. Regarding precipitation, models project a consistent decrease in precipitation during the 21st century for the entire Mediterranean basin, and during the warm season especially, so April through September, with the highest magnitude in summer, and in winter also for most of the Mediterranean, except in the most northern areas where actually weather conditions are expected. Here in the more central and northern countries of the Mediterranean basin, there's a predominant shift towards a precipitation regime of higher interannual variability, higher intensity, greater extremes, so causing flooding, etc. And in the southern countries, it's mainly a decreased precipitation frequency and longer dry spells, especially in summer. And here we can also see in the graphs like the different scenarios before. So the more pessimistic is the lower one, where there's even more decrease in precipitation compared to pre-industrial levels. And the mean rate of land precipitation decrease among models is around 4% per each degree of global warming. And that would determine, depending on the scenario, a reduction in precipitation in the range of 4 to 22%, depending on the scenario in the 21st century. Regarding the Mediterranean Sea, so surface waters are warming, deep waters are becoming saltier, waters have also acidified and will continue to do so. As you are also probably expecting, sea level and perceiving sea level is rising. And around at the end of the 21st century, depending on the scenario, the basin mean sea level will likely be 37 to 90 centimeters higher. And some other models with smaller probability also predict over 110 centimeters increase. And sea level rise will also increase the frequency and intensity of coastal floods and erosion. Regarding pollution, so now starting with the non-climate drivers impacts, across the Mediterranean basin, ocean and inland pollution are transboundary, diverse, and they are increasing in both quantity and in the number of pollutants due to demographic pressures, enhanced industrial and agricultural activities, and also climate change. For air pollution, the Mediterranean basin is among the regions in the world with the highest concentrations of gaseous air pollutants, and the contribution of ships and road traffic to transport sector emissions and general air pollution in the Mediterranean basin is increasing. Emissions of aerosols and particulate matter in the atmosphere arise from a variety of sources, so both anthropogenic, transport, industry, biomass burning, but also from natural sources. But the occurrence of critically high particulate matter concentrations associated with dust outbreaks is higher in the southern Mediterranean countries than in the northern part. Regarding the air pollution, the pollution of seawater, Mediterranean waters are generally oligotrophic, so with low nutrients, but nutrient enrichment can cause eutrophication and may provoke harmful and toxic algal blooms, trends that will likely increase. And harmful algal blooms may cause negative impacts not only on ecosystems, but also on, it may also harm human health. And also the Mediterranean Sea is one of the most polluted large water bodies globally in terms of plastic. And this is also projected to increase, at least in the short term. Regarding land and sea use change, as you probably know, urban and peri-urban areas are growing rapidly all over the Mediterranean, especially along the coasts. And urbanization is a major driving force for biodiversity loss, biological homogenization, causing landscape fragmentation, loss of open habitats, and replacing agricultural systems and natural vegetation. And in many regions of North Africa and the Middle East, the dominant land use change process is forest degradation caused by land overexploitation. And future land use trends depend strongly on regional policies, also local policies, for urbanization, agriculture, forestry, and nature conservation. And regarding sea use change, marine resource overexploitation and unsustainable fishing practices are the main driver of marine species population decline. And finally, the non-indigenous species threat in the sea, particularly in the Levantine Basin, it's a hotspot for the establishment of many non-indigenous species, mostly mollusks and decapods. The number and spread of these indigenous species will increase further with increasing shipping activity and the impacts of climate also on the ocean. And on land, there is a high number of non-indigenous species in human-modified ecosystems and in regions with a high infrastructure development. So most of these non-indigenous species are plants introduced intentionally as ornamentals, and they are followed by invertebrates, some of which can cause damages to crops and forests. With warming, current major non-indigenous species are predicted to shift northwards by 37 to 55 kilometers per decade. And this is a pattern that will very likely continue in the near future due to increasing air and maritime cargo and where these taxa can be easily transported as stowaways. So these were the main environmental problems that the Mediterranean basin is facing. Many of you had mentioned in the chat before. These are also summarized in this infographic that you see here, which is also obtained from the first Mediterranean assessment report that I just mentioned before. And now we would like to talk briefly about the consequences of all of these environmental threats that, again, we are sure that unfortunately you are very familiar with. So this is also like a summary that is also obtained from this report that summarizes the main environmental change and climate change drivers and impacts, and also the sectors or the areas where it mostly affects. So for example, regarding water, renewable water resources are unevenly distributed among Mediterranean regions. So in the northern Mediterranean, there is more availability of these resources. And in this case, both quality and quantity of these fresh water resources will be impacted and will decrease, while at the same time, the demand of agriculture and tourism increases, and they coincide. The peaks of this demand is in summer, where there is actually less water availability. This can also create tensions for different water uses. And actually already many people in the Mediterranean countries are suffering from water scarcity and extreme water shortage. And this is predicted to increase. Aquifer recharge will also be strongly impacted by this warming and reduced rainfall, particularly in semi-arid areas. And there will also be risks regarding flooding, so disastrous flash floods, are frequent already in many countries, and they will increase, for example, Italy, France, Spain, but also many other countries, and they will affect mainly on the coastal areas. In particular, where population and urban settlements are growing in flood-prone areas. And regarding water quality, there's important challenges to groundwater quality in coastal areas, because they are likely to arise and increase the saltwater intrusion. So the groundwater aquifers will be affected in this sense. I seem to have been painting on the on the screen. Sorry for that. I don't know how to stop that. Hopefully when we change the slide. Yes, then regarding food security, so warmer and drier climates with more frequent and intense extreme events, and in combination with this higher soil salinization, all of this will of course put food security on threat. Food demand will also increase if with population increase, and crop, fish and livestock yields might also be declining regarding climate change impact. So all of this, and also the regional imbalances in food security, all of this will be impacted severely in the future. For example, maize is the crop that will be most affected by climate change, projecting declines of up to 17% in some countries, and also depending on the scenario. And some water demanding crops like tomatoes, they're also at risks. And the production of some currently rain-fed crops, such as olives, could become infeasible without irrigation. And sea level rise will likely impact the agricultural sector by a direct impact on agricultural areas in coastal zones, such as like Egypt. And also new pests and pathogens may contribute even more to these larger losses in the agricultural sector. And yeah, regarding ecosystems, fire risk will increase, falling water levels will impact wetlands and freshwater ecosystems, and the geographic distribution of these terrestrial and marine species will also change. And then finally, regarding human health, heat-related illnesses and fatalities will become more frequent due to increase in temperatures and increase in the duration of heat waves, and also the intensity. And of course, especially in cities where there is the so-called urban heat island effect. So pollen allergies might also expand, and also these will affect especially the most vulnerable sector of the population, so the elderly, the ill, and the children. Right, so after all of this bad news, but unfortunately the reality, there is light at the end of the tunnel, fortunately, and in the face of all of these threats, current and potential impacts so threats and current and potential impacts that the Mediterranean cities you are facing, there is opportunities and there is a need to increase resilience. So what is resilience? Resilience means to develop strategies for dealing with these future shocks and stresses, and to be able to adapt and thrive in the face of these challenges. And cities in particular, you need to become more resilient to environmental change, as impacts will be disproportionately high in these locations due to, as we have mentioned, this concentration of population and assets, and these amplifying conditions and impacts in the future. And this requires knowledge exchange and promotion of ambitious action against climate and environmental change, and new approaches to urban development, which we will also talk about. So to summarize some of the opportunities regarding governance, there is a need to increase collaboration between areas or departments within your own local government. So not work only within your same area and with your same colleagues, but talk to the other ones to collaborate and find solutions together and coordinate within the local government to find solutions, because you have a common goal, which is to tackle climate change and tackle these environmental impacts. So we have to work together. And also increase multi-level collaboration. So at the supramunicipal level, at the regional and even national scale, but also with neighboring cities. So talk to your neighboring cities to see what they have done, what is working for them, what's not. And also in some areas, you might have to work together. For example, regarding river flooding, because the river, of course, will go through different municipalities and you will have to work together. Regarding strategies and policies, you need to include nature-based solutions that we will see now, but also other environmental management criteria in urbanism planning, and also other areas, as this can be incorporated in all different projects. So in urbanism planning, also in the health projects. And you need to engage with other stakeholders. You need to engage and collaborate with citizens, NGOs, the private sector to collect their input, recommendations, because again, you all have the same goal here. And then very important, as we already mentioned, the implementation of nature-based solutions. So the role that they have, because they are cost effective and they have multiple co-benefits and they can help you in a big part to tackle these changes. These impacts, sorry. Right, so let's hear from you again before we start getting deep into the nature-based solution types. Again, if you can let us know in the chat, we have many questions here, you can let us know. Besides these environmental threats that I have here presented, if you miss any other significant impact or threat that your city is facing and that you want to let us know. We also would like to ask you what types of nature-based solutions do you know, so the specific types, and what benefits these nature-based solutions have, or the main ones, because they have many of them. And we also want to know if you incorporate nature-based solutions in your projects or planning. So a lot of questions, but let us know if you want some of them.
Silvia, there is someone with the hand raised. I don't know if there is time for a quick intervention.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Let me maybe, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, because the name is written in Arabic and I cannot read Arabic, but
I am also trying to get the translation, but I can't seem to find it.
Now, you can make your question. Hello? No.
Otherwise, maybe we can finish.
Well, in the meantime, in the chat, they are talking about marine litter, the establishment of industrial cities away from civilian state, the transfer of all the industries outside the city.
I can see that for some, the term nature-based solution.
Ziad, what is the person who is raising the hand? So maybe if you want to speak, or maybe you raised your hand by mistake. Okay.
Maybe it was by mistake. Otherwise, there's plenty of time for asking the questions later on.
Okay, so we can go ahead.
Yeah, we go ahead. Perfect. Thank you very much for. I was looking at them now. At your answers, some of you do know what the nature-based solutions are. Some of you don't, and you're already like saying some examples. So yes, hopefully for those of you who don't know about this, you will learn today, some of it at least. There's a lot of information. Also, something that I forgot to say, especially now, I guess, which is maybe some new knowledge that you might not know all of it. Don't worry about taking notes or trying to read everything or understand everything, because we will send you later on from MedCities, we'll send you a longer and a more complete presentation of this PowerPoint presentation that you're seeing now. So with more text and the explanations, longer explanation. So you don't have to now stress about there's only one word in this slide or something like this, because you will have the longer version. We just wanted to include more pictures and graphs here, so it is easy for you to follow. So don't worry about that. Right, so before entering into the the nature-based solutions, very quickly reminding, or maybe you're also not too familiar with this, but of the term ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are the multitude of benefits that nature provides to society. And these services, ecosystem services, makes human life possible because they provide us with nutritious food and clean water, and regulating disease and climate, supporting the pollination of crops and soil formation, and also providing recreational, cultural, and spiritual benefits. There's 4 main types of ecosystem services that you can see in the picture here. There's provisioning services, so it's material benefits that we get from ecosystems, so supply of food, water, fibers, wood, and fuels. Regulating services, which are invisible, we cannot see them, but they are benefits that we obtain from the regulation of ecosystem processes. And this is, for example, the regulation of air quality, soil fertility, also control of floods or crop pollination. And then we have supporting services. They are necessary for the production of all the other ecosystem services. And for example, they are providing plants or animals with living spaces, allowing for diversity of species, and maintaining genetic diversity. And finally, these cultural services, so non-material benefits again, that we gain from ecosystems. And this is the aesthetic and engineering inspiration, cultural identity, and spiritual well-being. So biodiversity and ecosystem services help us adapt, become more resilient to climate change and environmental impacts. They are therefore a crucial part of our effort to combat climate change, and working with nature rather than against it. It's one of the main concepts that we need to have clear. So we work with nature and not against it. And this will bring us multiple benefits, not only to tackle the risk, but other co-benefits. And at the same time, climate change and these other environmental threats that we've seen, they also affect these ecosystem services and the natural systems. So the continuing loss of biodiversity and degradation of ecosystems weakens the ability to provide these essential services to the extent that we can reach irreversible tipping points. So strong evidence links that global ecosystem degradation to the reduced so it's linking this ecosystem degradation to the reduced provision of ecosystems, and therefore a decline in human well-being, and of course of our ecosystems. Therefore, we need to choose how to live and how to do it sustainably, how we move around, how we develop land, how we develop our cities. Everything has an impact on the quality of the air we breathe and the water we drink and the weather we experience. So we need to conserve and enhance the quality of the water flow and supply and the quality of air and land. And we can do this through enhancing these ecosystem services and with nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions. There are several definitions by different organizations, but they all have the overall concept is the same. Sorry, I think some of you have the microphone open. If you can maybe mute it so we don't have interference. But yeah, there's many definitions, but they all mean the overall concept and goal is the same. So we have selected here 2 of the definitions. Living solutions inspired and supported by nature to address societal challenges. They are cost effective, they provide simultaneous environmental, social, and economic benefits, and they help us build this resilience. And this definition is by the European Commission. And then we have actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address, again, societal challenges in an effective and adaptive way. And at the same time, they provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. This is the definition of the International Union for Conservation and Nature. nature-based solutions, they deliver ecosystem services and they also use them, and they are considered an umbrella concept that covers a whole range of ecosystem-related approaches. They all share a common focus on ecosystem services, and the aim is to, as we have seen, address societal challenges. And different nature-based interventions have long supported these social challenges, such as food and water security, and disaster risk reduction and mitigation or adaptation to climate change. And at the same time, they have been improving sustainable livelihoods and protecting ecosystems and biodiversity. And nature-based solutions is actually part of a shift where people moved from being passive beneficiaries of nature to proactively protecting, managing, or restoring ecosystems as a contribution to addressing this range of major societal challenges. And although nature-based solutions have been implemented for a long time in specific contexts, the realization and the opportunity for their broader use and at larger scales has grown significantly in the last 2 decades. So yeah, these are just some of the nature-based solution principles that we need to remember, we need to know they're important. All the nature-based solutions embrace nature conservation norms. They can be implemented alone, but also in an integrated manner with other solutions that are not necessarily nature-based, such as technological or engineering solutions. They are determined by site-specific natural and cultural contexts that include traditional, local, and scientific knowledge. So each case has to be studied in detail, and they produce societal benefits in an equitable way, and they promote also broad participation. They also maintain the biological and cultural diversity and the ability of ecosystems to evolve over time. So they work with nature. They're applied at a landscape, and they also recognize and address the trade-offs between the production of a few immediate economic benefits for development and future options for the production of this full range of ecosystem services. And finally, as we have already mentioned, they are an integral part of the overall design of policies and measures or actions to address a specific challenge. Right, so regarding the specific types of nature-based solutions, they can be classified differently according to the ecosystem-based approach, or according to the nature-based challenge that is expected to solve, or according to the ecosystem service that they are delivering. But no matter what, doesn't matter how they are classified, but here we will discuss it by these types, like green roofs, vertical gardens, or like specific types that hopefully is useful for you, and you can see the application in your city, depending on the case. So yeah, regarding the first one, green roofs. Also, before I start with this one, on the right side of the slide, for all of these nature-based solutions that we will be talking about, there's this little table which we think can be very useful for you, where it says the nature-based solution, for example, green roofs. And on the left side of this table, you see the main benefit of the solution marked in red, but also all the other co-benefits from high provision to low provision co-benefit in different shades of green. And these co-benefits are also classified if they are environmental co-benefits, social cultural co-benefits, or economic co-benefits. So here you can see a little bit what are the main benefits of each nature-based solution. So for example, green roofs. Green roofs, they comprise a multi-layered system, and they cover the roof of a building or podium structure with vegetation cover or landscaping. There are two types of green roofs, intensive and extensive. Extensive green roofs are normally characterized by a more shallow growing, medium self-sustaining and low maintenance planting that covers the entire roof. And they generally provide higher biodiversity benefits than intensive green roofs that have a lush vegetation and a deeper substrate and can sustain larger plants. Extensive systems usually receive no irrigation or fertilization or mainly at some parts of the process, but they tend to use less irrigation and fertilization than the intensive ones. And given that they have a relatively low weight compared to intensive green roofs, the extensive roofs can be retrofitted or applied to many existing buildings, and especially in cities, in dense urban cities. Green roofs add additional thermal insulation in the building, as well as potentially they also lower the heating and the cooling costs for the building. So actually energy savings are achieved. They also reduce the heat reflected by the building rooftops compared to conventional roofing materials. And they can also reduce stormwater runoff up to 20%. Because green roofs retain water during rainfall events, and then they delay this runoff until after peak rainfall and returning water to the atmosphere through evaporation. And as you see on the table, so the co-benefits are to enhance biodiversity, mitigate the urban heat island effect, and also lower the indoor temperatures, which can be up to 5 degrees. And of course, the specific cooling and runoff attenuation impacts vary depending on the characteristics of the plant and the substrate and the drainage and many components. And of course, intensive green roofs normally have the highest cooling and rainfall retention capacity compared to extensive green roofs. But extensive roofs, as we said, have received almost no irrigation or fertilization, and also they are cheaper. The capital and maintenance costs normally are cheaper than those of intensive. And yes, finally, these green roofs can also be combined with the so-called blue roofs that we will also see later, which can combine also the water component and even with like solar panels that we will see later. Important here, not only for this one, but in general, many solutions, nature-based solutions, think always of using recycled materials for all the materials that you need to use. Also include renewable energy as possible. Try to minimize irrigation or try to reuse water. We will also see some of these solutions later. And of course, use your local plants and species, so that they don't take too much water, and that they are also adapted to, for example, saltier conditions or drought conditions. Right, so we also have another type here, which is the vertical gardens. They are also called bio walls, vertical greening systems. They consist of vertical structures covered in vegetation, as you can see in the picture. They provide cooling by intercepting solar radiation. They can also provide thermal insulation. And of course shading, reducing also the exterior surface temperatures, and therefore they reduce the heat transfer into the building. So the comfort, the climatic comfort within the building is improved. Some studies have seen or have predicted that if a direct green facade on a building in a Mediterranean climate could reduce external wall surface temperatures by up to 11 degrees almost. So yeah, there's also evidence that it seems to be more an impact on the internal air cooling than the local air ambient temperature. And again, in drought prone areas, important to select species that don't have that much irrigation requirements. And yeah, in this solution, they can also be combined with water storage tanks that we will also see later to capture rainfall, so that the irrigation can be recycled with reused water, even though, of course, all of this will increase the capital investment. But in this case, yeah, it could also be combined with this solution of like rainwater harvesting. And in particular cases, it could also be that adapting the construction, you could improve and adapting this to improve the filtration capacity. You could use this vertical garden also as a gray water treatment. So permitting to reuse this gray water that has been treated before for irrigation. No? So yeah, this is, in this next slide, we can see one that probably maybe we didn't even consider this as nature-based solutions, but definitely urban, peri-urban parks, and then forests, and also green corridors and other green spaces, they are considered definitely a nature-based solution, a very common one. And one of the main benefits is that they regulate temperature. So they can cool temperatures in cities by providing shade and also enhancing evapotranspiration. Well-designed green corridors can improve urban ventilation, allowing cooler air from outside to penetrate into these more densely built areas, and thereby reducing the urban heat island effect. Some urban parks can cool the temperatures like around 1 to 2 degrees during the day compared to non-green areas. And they also have another function, which is to manage stormwater. So trees, grass, and other vegetations in urban parks can intersect, treat, and infiltrate this stormwater runoff, contributing to mitigating the risk of surface flooding in cities. And of course, urban parks and forests can also incorporate other elements such as retention ponds, pervious surfaces, and then this improves even more the park's overall runoff retention capacity. And of course, the many other co-benefits that these have, as you probably know, so carbon sequestration, especially by trees, attenuation of surface runoff, air quality regulation, the provision of opportunities for recreation and contact with nature, which in turn can lead to improved health, human health, and of course, maintenance of biodiversity. And again, important to select species adapted to your local environment and climatic conditions to avoid also possible side effects like the introduction of exotic species, which can live and can have negative impacts on local biodiversity. Also this one, which is a low cost option as well, which is green urban furniture. So nature-based solutions can involve these benches or other public outdoor furniture items like a bus stop to include this green aspect. So these solutions can provide shading, mitigating the effect of extreme heat, and they can also contribute in some cases to improving surface runoff, depending also on the size and the type. There's different types and designs here. You can see many of them. For example, one example could be this bus shelter, which has a green roofs, and then also on the side it has this photovoltaic powered shelter with that provides the electricity for example, illuminating the screen when the bus is coming, the information board, and other functions. And again, species should be carefully selected, taking into consideration the local climate. And then we can also add greening into our transport infrastructure. So planting of vegetation alongside high capacity infrastructure like highways or railways, but also in streets and tram lines. This covers a wide range of measures like street trees, green paths, and grass-lined rail tracks, as we can see here in the picture. And because they involve the introduction of pervious surfaces or urban trees, these greening measures can contribute to stormwater management, but also to temperature regulation. And they can also help to mitigate the heat island effect and also reduce noise. Also, depending on the design and the location, they can actually also contribute to improving the ecological connectivity by mitigating fragmentation of habitats and facilitating wildlife movement, particularly with when greening is applied. So as we can see in the top picture, for example. Then urban gardens, which also have a wide range of co-benefits and can also be very applicable in cities, in urban dense cities. So these urban gardens, they include allotment gardens, communal courtyards, and they provide a suite of ecosystem services from the provision of food to microclimate regulation, and also water regulation due to unsealed soils in case that the urban garden is not on a paved surface. In general, the gardens could be looked up by residents and managed by residents. and not necessarily professionals. So private landowners and residents could take care of them, and therefore there's no public maintenance cost involved in this solution. Again, in drought-prone areas, using more drought-tolerant plants can reduce the need for water irrigation, and of course, when planting more saline vegetable and drought-tolerant vegetation, there will be more food available during dry spells. Urban gardens, if they present pervious surfaces, as mentioned, they can intercept this intense precipitation, temporarily hold the water, and hence reduce the peak flow and increase infiltration in the soil. Important here also to use organic fertilizers, because if chemical inputs such as pesticides and artificial fertilizers are used, this can result in also negative environmental impacts. And then a very important co-benefit as well, which is that urban gardens provide space for recreation and promote social cohesion, as well as habitats for wildlife and genetic diversity. And they can, of course, create opportunities for leisure and recreation and promote health and well-being, as well as a sense of place and cultural identity and social cohesion. So these are all very important factors also to adapt to climate change. Right, and regarding river restoration for flood control, so in an attempt to prevent flooding or supporting changes of agricultural practices, for example, some riverbeds have been modified and artificially reconstructed with concrete or big stones. And they have therefore modified the flows and decreasing fauna habitat and vegetation diversity. And this has led to uniform flows in the rivers and often having the effect of reducing travel time along the river. Restoring the natural state of the river can benefit the water cycle, increase biodiversity, control erosion, and reduce the risk of flooding. And there are several nature-based solutions that can be implemented. So the renaturalization of riverbed to remove some of these inert and concrete structures and replacing them with vegetation structures. And these interventions could positively impact the erosion processes, restore biodiversity, and mitigate flood risk. Also, a renaturalization of the riverbed material, so recovering some of the nature-like structure and composition of the riverbed material, and especially the balance between fine and coarse sediment. This can be achieved either by reactivating erosion on banks that can provide this desirable type of sediments, or by controlling erosion on banks providing the undesirable type of sediments. And then we can also, as riverbank protection removal, so we can remove some of the parts of the riverbank fixation, especially the inert ones like stone and concrete, and this can enhance the lateral connection of the river and reintroduce diversity flow along the river and the diversity of habitats, and can cap floods mainstream. And regarding lake restoration, some lakes have also been altered in the past. They have been drained or they have had their water quality impaired. And by restoring the lakes, we can enhance their original function and structure. When they are restored, they can store additional flood water from rivers flowing through them, and also from small tributaries and catchment area, and they can slow runoff and delay the discharge. They can also recharge groundwater resources and serve as a water reservoir, which is particularly important for coping with droughts and water scarcity situations. And they, of course, also provide other services like fish provision, water supply, recreation, and habitat for species. There's many techniques and it of course depends on the specific case. We cannot talk about all of them, but in the case of eutrophication, for example, that we were mentioning before, this means to one of the techniques should be to decrease the loading of nutrients, particularly phosphorus, from different watershed sources that end up there, and control then the external sources. This sometimes is sufficient return some lakes to their former conditions. But sometimes, yes, there's other techniques or solutions that have to be done. For example, control or eliminate non-native species or fishery and food chain manipulation, etc. Yes, regarding coastal impacts here, so to mitigate coastal flood mitigation and coastal erosion, so here we have the managed realignment and also restoration of coastal wetlands, so these two nature-based solutions. So traditional sea defense provides a fixed protection of people and their assets against coastal flooding and erosion. But fixing the position of the coastline obstructs the natural coastal processes, and this can have significant detrimental effects on these dynamic and adaptive ecosystems. So by managed realignment, this refers to moving the line of hard flood defenses further inland and on rising ground, and in order to recreate these intertidal habitats between new and old defense line, and by allowing the coastline to recede and the intertidal zone to expand, these created or restored resulting habitats can provide this natural protection from flooding and erosion, as well as many other ecosystem services, as they constitute significant reservoirs of biodiversity. And these intertidal habitats that we can see in the picture, they are highly effective at attenuating wave energy, because meaning that waves are smaller in height and not as powerful as when they reach the shore, and that results in lower coastal flood erosion. And coastal wetlands, they include saltwater marshes, estuaries, lagoons, and the restoration of these coastal wetlands involves the addition of sediment to raise land above the water level in order for wetland plants to colonize the area, or the wetting of drained wetlands by restricting groundwater extraction and blocking drains. And also another measure could be the removal or relocation of coastal defenses further inland. And all of this can reduce the impact of sea level rise. As the constant supply and accumulation of sediment to the coast leads to maintaining their elevation relative to sea level. And again, coastal wetlands are hotspots for biodiversity. And also they often constitute breeding and nursery grounds for fish and shellfish and birds and mammals. And sand dunes, dunes occur naturally. See.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
it's okay.
Well, yeah, we have two people with their hands raised, so yes. We thought it would be nice to let them provide their point of view yes. Before we continue. Is that okay? Okay.
It's perfect.
Okay, so first, maybe, sorry for my pronunciation again, 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐞𝐬, if you want to speak. Okay, your microphone is mute. You will have to unmute it first. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous. Alors, 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐿, membre du conseil municipal de Nabeul, Tunisie. Donc, j'ai voulu attirer l'attention. La culture hydroponique, est-ce qu'elle est considérée comme étant une solution basée sur la nature? Il y a aussi la culture des algues en tant qu'alternative qui donne, disons, un rendement alimentaire un peu supérieur aux cultures traditionnelles, comme l'azola, la spiruline et tout ça. Il y a aussi l'installation des structures dans le large du Méditerranée et qui vont servir comme un nid pour création de populations, que ce soit végétales ou animales. Donc, c'est 3 points que j'ai voulu, disons, voir un peu votre avis pour ces solutions. Est-ce qu'ils sont des solutions basées sur la nature? est-ce qu'ils sont des solutions viables et donnent des importances pour le changement climatique ou non? Merci.
Vale, Gemma, yo tengo, sorry.
Yes,
I unfortunately couldn't get the translation because I don't seem to see the
okay.
anymore.
Okay. Yeah, well, I have it written down, so I will translate it to you so that you can answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the question, well, I think it's very, very interesting. So Mr. 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐿 was drawing our attention to hydroponic culture. So he was wondering if it is considered a nature-based solution, and what would be your opinion about it as a nature-based solution, and about alga, the alga culture as an alternative to provide yield, because, well, there are some studies that say that, and some examples that say that the yield production of alga is above some traditional cultures, and some of them, of course, can be, they are very intrusive, such as, well, he was putting the example of spirulina. And also the alga culture would be an opportunity, if made in deep sea, to provide habitat for new species. So also as a conservation and nature-based solution. So what are your thoughts about this, Sylvia?
Yes, so the hydroponic, yes, techniques, I don't think they are considered nature-based solutions per se, as far as I'm concerned. We were not going to talk about these specific ones right now, but again, they can be very useful depending on the case, of course, and they are also very water efficient in this sense. And of course, depending on the application, it can be totally a viable solution, even though it's not, of course, as far as I know, a nature-based solution is considered per se. Yes, definitely, definitely an option. And then, sorry, the second part of the question, the algae production you were mentioning, Gemma, if you can repeat.
Yeah, about the algae production in the deep sea to provide habitat. So not only as a culture, but also to provide habitat to new species.
Definitely. See, like algae communities, of course, provide the habitat itself, and the nutrients. It's like an ecosystem itself that provides, of course, the habitat for many other species, such as like fish, but also many other species that, of course, allows the ecosystem to run and to persist, and therefore help with the fish production and in this case, of course, the economic sustainability of this sector. So yes, definitely. Also, we will not specifically talk about this one specific, but yes, definitely a very important also solution to implement, especially in coastal areas. Yes.
Yeah. Also, in this sense, I would highlight also in the chat, they are saying that, of course, it's a good carbon dioxide sequestration measure, and also for the protection of the sand dunes and all this, the effect that the algae make of avoiding the erosion of the deep sea, it would be also very important. We have another question. Sylvia, maybe you want to switch to the translation in English?
Yes.
So that you can.
I've been trying to find it. It's just I don't.
It's on the bottom of the screen.
Yes,
if
but
not, I will.
I don't have the whole screen because I am presenting.
Okay.
So for some reason, some of the buttons appear and some of them.
Okay, we can make the
it.
question, and I'll translate again. So the other person who wanted to speak is. Sorry again for my pronunciation. 𝐬𝐤𝐿 Mayata. If you want to speak, you can reactivate the audio. Or maybe again, the hand is risen by mistake. No, okay. If not, we can try later.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I thought it would be nice to
Yes.
hear.
Definitely. No,
go on.
also, so you guys get a break from my voice because it's also a lot of me talking. So yes, perfect, Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you see the full screen again. So let me just, yes, so we were in the sand dune, so another nature-based solution to implement in coastlines. So yeah, as you know, dunes occur naturally along most less developed sandy coastlines, and they protect the coast from erosion and inland areas from flooding. And they form this natural barrier to wind and waves. So they can absorb part of their force. If they are well managed, dune can offer this high degree of protection against flooding. And when the erosion, if the erosion is very severe, it is true that sometimes other additional measures are necessary. But dune construction or rehabilitation can be combined with beach nourishment and building hard physical structures, which are called gray measures because, yeah, they are not all nature-based. So you can see here some pictures of some dune rehabilitations, and you know, compared to hard physical structures of coastal protection, dunes are more aesthetic normally, and they are beneficial for both tourism and nature. And yes, they can include, so the rehabilitation of dunes, they include grass planting and you know, dune touching by covering the dune's face with branches and plant debris, and also dune fencing. And all of these measures also help to catch and accumulate sand, and they are complementary and usually also combined, as I said, with gray measures. But here, awareness campaigns might also be necessary in relation to use restrictions of the dune area and to avoid breaching of the rules and vandalism. Right, and then regarding sustainable drainage systems, so SUDs, as they are also called, you might have probably heard of them. There are many different types of these sustainable drainage systems. We will see some of them now. So sustainable urban drainage systems, they constitute a relatively new approach to water management in urban areas. Their objective is to maintain or replicate the pre-development water cycle. So when urban development occurs, the natural water cycle is altered to the extent that stormwater runoff from individual properties and roads intensify. And they can, of course, the flow also usually increase potential contaminants from these residential and commercial areas to the, and they flow into the streams of water courses. So these sustainable drainage systems are a set, or they include a set of measures called like the management train. They all use natural features and processes to slow down and reduce this volume of surface water runoff in order to manage this downstream flood risk and also reduce the risk of runoff caused pollution. Normally, the sustainable drainage principles are used close to the source, so with a relatively small catchment area. And they also contribute to water quality issues. So some of the components can reduce sediment and contaminants from runoff by allowing them to settle or through biological breakdown of pollutants. And they can also, these sustainable drainage systems can also enhance water availability by capturing and storing rainwater. Yes, and other co-benefits, so improving groundwater supplies and enhancing the aesthetic and amenity value of urban developments, and also providing opportunities for recreation and education. So yes, this can involve different combination of components. So it's not that you can implement one and not the other one, they can be complementary. And there's like several categories, but yes, they are, they make efficient use of the space, and they are usually less costly than underground conventional drainage systems. And here the main difference with these conventional drainage systems is that, or the conventional pipe system, is that while the conventional ones mainly address the stormwater quantity control, these sustainable drainage systems also pay attention to all three aspects of stormwater. So the quantity, the quality, and the amenity and biodiversity. And they can actually be sized to suit most individual sites, from residential house blocks through whole subdivisions. And yes, and they can be applied to many different areas. So in new roads or streets, existing streets, upgrading the drainage systems or pavements, publicly owned land or new residential developments, car parks, driveways, many applications. And implementation usually requires the coordination between different departments, so of the local public authority, such as environment, urban planning, public space, etc. So quickly to see some of them. Rainwater harvesting, which actually can also be seen sometimes as a gray measure. Yes, the main goal here is to collect and storage rainwater for later use. They are collected, the rainwater can be collected from roofs, but can also be retained from other impermeable surfaces, such as industrial buildings or parking houses. And they are stored in individual water pads, as you see in the pictures, but also they can be in underground cisterns or large storage tanks. And the main purpose is to save tap water and cope with water scarcity during dry spells. This harvested water can be stored and then used for many purposes. So non-potable purposes in this case, like watering green spaces and gardens, or if treated, also as gray water for household or industries. And at the same time, if appropriately designed rainwater system, harvesting systems, they can also be a source control element in these sustainable drainage systems to reduce runoff volume and mitigate the impacts of stormwater from heavy precipitations. And rainwater harvesting can be implemented in almost all locations with roofs and other surfaces appropriate for collection. So it's very applicable to dense urban settings. Yes, and as we said, this solution can be either just for water storage or also for surface water management, depending also on the volume that it can store, etc. And they're also quite, cheap and not super expensive solution to apply, to implement. Regarding pervious surfaces, they can also be applicable in many places, like car parks, pedestrian streets, spaces between buildings, squares and playgrounds. You can see some pictures of types of them. Then they allow rainwater to infiltrate because they are pervious surfaces, so they infiltrate through the surface and into the underlying layers. And some types also allow infiltration to underlying groundwater, and therefore they contribute to increase the groundwater levels and flows. They can also regulate the rate of runoff by storing this rainfall and releasing it at a controlled rate. And here there's different types. So there's porous surfaces that infiltrate water across the entire surface. So this is, for example, reinforced grass or gravel or cobblestones with porous concrete. And then there's also permeable surfacing, which is composed of material that it's itself impervious to water, but contains a pattern of voids through the surface, which allows the infiltration. And as a potential disadvantage, the infiltration is generally not recommended in areas where the soil or geology has low permeability, or the groundwater levels are high, and the underlying substrate is contaminated. Then we also have infiltration basins and trenches. So infiltration basins are shallow vegetated depressions, as you can see in the two top pictures. They are designed to treat small drainage areas, and they store the runoff on the surface and then infiltrate it gradually into the ground. For infiltration basins, a underlying soils and geology must be highly pervious. And normally they are usually dry, like we can see in the top right picture, and except in periods of heavy precipitations where they fill up. And these infiltration basins also treat runoff through processes of physical filtration to remove solids and absorption onto the material into the surrounding soil, or through biochemical reactions that they involve microorganisms. So it's also to increase this water quality. And they are ideal also for use as playing fields or recreational areas or public open space. And infiltration trenches are also very easy to incorporate, the two lower pictures. They are also shallow excavations and they are filled with rubble or stones, and it allows the water to infiltrate into the surrounding soils from the bottom and the sides of the trench. And they are generally designed to collect and infiltrate runoff from a small area as well, like, for example, like a car park, like you will see in the picture. And yes, and they're also very easy to incorporate in many places. Right. Then we have detention basins. So as you see, many different types. These ones, they are also vegetated depressions, as you can see in the pictures, and they intended to store and slow down the flow of runoff water runoff. So the sediments and other pollutants contained in the stored water can be filtered and absorbed by the surrounding soil, or also biochemically degraded, while the stored water can be slowly drained to a nearby watercourse using an outlet control structure to control this flow rate. And detention basins don't generally allow infiltration. And they can also function as a recreational or other amenity facility. And they are normally placed at the end of this management train that we said, so at the end of the sustainable drainage solution, so are at the very last part. So they can be used if there's an extended treatment of the runoff is required, and also for landscape reasons and recreation, as you can see from the pictures. Yes, and they, as I said, they are effectively capturing sediment in urban or rural runoff. Sometimes where concentrations are also high, they need to have a pretreatment system. And yeah, there's also no regional constraints to use these detention basins. They can be useful for locations prone to mosquitoes because they should be designed to drain relatively quickly after an event. So yeah, the base is drying out completely, and therefore it limits the potential of mosquitoes to become established. Then we have blue roofs that we mentioned also before, that can be combined, as you see in the lower picture, also with green roofs. They detain and slowly release the stormwater runoff by using various types of flow control devices or structures. And they can also be, there's different types also of these blue roofs, but basically the water that is captured can be used for non-potable uses on site for irrigation and direct groundwater recharge. And it can also be sprayed directly onto the roof to increase the cooling effect caused by evapotranspiration. And then there's active blue roofs where you can automatically design them so they release the water at a certain time. You can program it, depending also, it can even have sophisticated systems where it can forecast the irrigation and have some sensors and interface data that feeds this to estimate the rainfall quantities. But there's also very simple ones, also like in the top picture, that they like store water and slowly release it with any other technological systems. And they typically require little or almost no upkeep. Whereas, the active systems do need more regular maintenance. And they can be placed or installed in flat roofs in buildings that are structurally capable of holding this additional load of water and the collected storm water. And as you see in the lower picture, as I was saying, it's a combination with the green roofs and also with solar panels. And yeah, in this case, this green roof is designed to retain like 50% of water, and the excess rainwater flows into the inner drain pipes, and this enables so that the rainwater storage in an underground cistern can be then pumped up for drip irrigation in this green roof, especially during the dry summer months. Right. And they also have some like compost boxes specifically in this roof. So as you can see, many different elements can be incorporated into the same solution. Right. And then I think this is one of the last ones, nature-based solutions, the constructed wetlands. They are maybe not widely used in very dense urban cities, but maybe in some suburbs or neighborhoods that are not as dense. And they are one of the most worldwide diffuse technology for the wastewater treatment. So they are based on the biological physical principles that occur in natural wetlands. So they replicate the function of these natural wetlands by filtering the pollutants from water. So they use wetland vegetation, the soil and their associated microbial assemblages to improve water quality. So yes, they are a common solution to treat this combined sewer overflow. So this excess of sewage and rainwater that cannot be treated by the receiving wastewater treatment facility, for example, during heavy rain events. And there's also different types, so more open water wetlands or horizontal surface flow, depending on where the water is applied. And they're also relatively inexpensive to build, and also with like low maintenance, and they can also be maintained by the local community, as there's no high technology part or electrical technology that needs to be maintained. Right. Wait, did I skip two?
Sylvia?
Sí, yes, sorry.
Hello. Before we continue with the other tools, which are not nature-based solutions, but great solutions, I would like to give again the word to Mr. 𝐕𝐶𝐫𝐿𝐼, because if he has any comments about this blog.
Yes, please, Gemma, write notes because
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, I will. Don't worry.
Justement, vous m'entendez?
Yes, I
Oui.
can. Thank you.
Justement, j'ai voulu attirer votre attention que certaines communes, certaines villes sont connues par la production traditionnelle de poterie. Et ici, à Nabeul, certains agriculteurs ont essayé d'utiliser les pots en terre cuite en tant que des petits réservoirs souterrains pour retenir l'eau et empêcher un peu l'évaporation et assurer l'irrigation à travers l'infiltration de terre cuite. Merci.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. So Sylvia, Mr. 𝐕𝐶𝐫𝐿𝐼 was saying that, well, he wanted to draw our attention that in some municipalities, in some territories, depending on the soil type, I guess, farmers use pottery, so I guess clay, to dig like reservoirs of and impermeabilize it from the soil, so that they can act as water reservoirs. So it's very, very interesting. That would be another nature-based solutions, because you are really using
Definitely.
the clay to impermeabilize, sorry, the territory.
Definitely, that is actually a really good point, and it would be nice to also know more details about that. Maybe later on in the discussion we can talk about it, like some good results that you have obtained in the municipality, if that's the case, and share with the rest, because it's definitely one of the main problems: water scarcity and water availability, also for competing with different uses, no, agriculture, industry, domestic, potable water, everything. So thank you for that, and definitely a really good solution as well. Right. So Gemma, if there's no more questions, maybe we jump into this shorter part with yes, gray solutions or not specifically nature-based solutions in this case, but that we also want to let you know and inform about in case you don't know. I'm sure many of them in this case you're aware of and you're familiar with. Jumping into it directly. So passive coolings of buildings. So this is more about designing of the building. There's different building design techniques that can actually help regarding improving the comfort and the quality, the climatic comfort in the buildings, modulating the heat gains and controlling heat dissipation in the building in order to improve this indoor thermal comfort. And also at the same time, reducing energy consumption. In this case, some examples, as you can see in the picture, are shading systems, which you are of course very aware of, but it's important to remember that they are important to have in this case for this to tackle these impacts. They are designed to control this solar radiation. Also, some materials can be used with certain properties that can control heat gains. Intelligent facades that also they have devices where attached to the building envelope where they can open or close automatically, in response to different temperatures and humidity or wind. These are of course more costly than simple simple blinds and shading systems. But yeah, especially during hot periods, these passive cooling systems of buildings, as we mentioned them, they are very, very useful. And similarly, cool or white roofs or lighter color roofs, facades and pavements, they are also very important to take into account because they have a higher solar reflectance, so a higher albedo, and therefore they have a high thermal emittance. This means that they absorb less solar energy during the day, and then they emit little heat at night. So it helps with the urban heating island effect. And this actually also helps the roofs in improving their durability because the materials are not subject to this excessive contraction and expansion due to the difference or high difference in temperatures. So yes, besides reducing ambient temperatures, it can also help in the durability of the roof. Right, and then two other measures, in this case, separate sewers, that, as you know, probably know that the separate sewers, so involve the separation of sewage and rainwater into two different pipe systems. And the separate sewer minimizes the risk, in this case, of flooded basements during extreme rainfall events for people living in low-lying areas. And in the case of this heavy rainfall event that leads to flooding, it's rainwater and not sewage from kitchens and bathrooms that would rise into the basement. Well, some classifications can consider this maybe as a hybrid, also with nature-based solutions. At the end, it doesn't doesn't matter at all or that much the classification of the type, but yeah, they are sometimes classified as a hybrid with nature-based solutions, as it can be combined with certain sustainable drainage system components that we've seen before. And then gray water reuse. So gray water is the wastewater that is discharged from showers, bathtubs, sinks, and also kitchen and dishwashers, etc. They don't include the black water from so the toilet water, and where fresh water is limited, the recycling of gray water and its reuse can be an adaptation measure as well. So this gray water would be collected by a separate sewer. It would be pre-treated by simple static degreaser or piped into a treatment system, and then when it reaches the good quality, it would be stocked into a reservoir, from which then this depurated water comes out and then can be inserted again into the house pipes and use it for different uses. Of course, for already existing buildings, it's a bit costly to change the system, but maybe for some new developments, it could be an option. And yes, also the good thing here is that grey water recycling is not dependent on the season or variability of rainfall. In this case, we are always producing grey water. So builders could install these dual plumbing systems in these new developments, for example, and supply treated grey water for toilet flushing or other non-potable uses like watering gardens, as mentioned. Right. And then finally, some other actions that you as a municipality can implement, a little bit of a mix of different actions that we think can also be useful to know. One is installation of water saving devices. So a wide range of different equipment is available in the market and it's also not very costly to reduce water consumption. In this case, for example, taps, aerators, low flow shower heads, taps with timers, with electronic shut-off. This can be installed not only in your public facilities or buildings, but also it can be distributed to the population, or at least inform through campaigns to the population, also because they are not very costly. Then you can also install water meters, again, in your public facilities to have a better control of the consumption of water in your public facilities and buildings. And there's also different types, more evolved or more basic. Of course, the cost will also depend on that. Then one that we have already mentioned, but in all of the planting and gardening and green infrastructure that is being used. So select species that are adapted to the climatic area, also regarding crops. So drought, saline and pest tolerant species. Also application of mulching. So the covering the ground with different type of materials that can be organic or inorganic, but to avoid to retain more water in this ground. Then you can also implement or approve an ordinance or regulation for new development in this case, or maybe in very integral or substantial rehabilitations of buildings and facilities. You can regulate so that it becomes bioclimatic constructions and building. So for example, that it has to have a rainwater harvesting system or a blue roof or a green roofs, and regulate that through regulation and urban planning in this case, building planning. Also prioritize use of organic fertilizers, and you can also regulate its use using some urban tools that you have regulation planning, preserve these natural areas that are important for providing of ecosystem services and biodiversity that might not be protected yet. Also you can create, for example, an action protocol for vulnerable people, specifically to heat episodes. So when you know that there's going to be a very intense heat wave or it's going to last for many days, have a protocol in collaboration with your health department in your municipality, where you identify all the most vulnerable people, for example, elderly or sick people. You have a list and you have a way or ways of contacting them and letting them know recommendations. So put your shades or don't go out, or if you go out, go into shade areas, etc. So maybe an action protocol of this sense if you don't have it in place yet. And also promote composting and reuse of gardening waste and others, or school waste, food waste. It's also something, or for example, distribute some composting equipment to population. It's also something that you can do in this sense. Here, this picture is just to somehow illustrate a little bit, the interconnection of everything, also linking to the other sessions that you might also be attending. So the energy efficiency, the waste, and the transport. So nature-based solutions are, as I've mentioned, an integral part of the overall design of policies and measures to address a specific challenge. So for these nature-based solutions that you implement, for them to have a broad influence, it's important that they are not only implemented in the field, but also into policy and planning and strategies. And they require a collaborative approach in planning and implementing and monitoring. So they are very related to these other sectors. So for example, with energy, we've seen that green roofs, for example, or green facades help reducing or achieve energy savings in this case, and it can also be combined with solar panels, and not only improving the comfort, the temperature, reducing the indoor temperature of the building, and also with transport. It's not only about increasing the green infrastructure, but also switch to sustainable modes of transport that then can also help improve air quality and citizens' health. No? So prioritize pedestrians, reduce car dependency, especially over walking, cycling, and public transport, and also with waste. So we need to go towards promoting, in this case, a Mediterranean diet. So with local production and reduction of food waste and promotion of composting, etc. And nature-based solutions are at the very center of all of these other measures from other sectors that we can implement. Right, so if there's no questions, maybe we can enter these last two sections of today's session. So one is the financing aspects of these nature-based solutions.
Yeah, before we go to this section, I can. Yes. Well, we don't have anyone who wants to speak now, but we have a lot of comments in the chat, so I thought it would be nice to comment on them. So as a lot of municipalities are commenting on possible solutions to work against climate change. So some of them are, for example, the installation of a system in the houses to collect the pluvial water, which in some areas it's a traditional technique. Another solution that they are commenting is the treatment. So they are commenting about the treatment and reuse of wastewater, for example, so here I can think about irrigation water, for example, the alga that we have already commented about carbon sequestration. Also, some municipalities are implementing seawater desalination, and I guess depending on the sea final salt content, it can be used for one thing or the other. Water saving agriculture. So this could be, for example, some techniques to work the soil, or some species which are more resilient to drought. And yeah, Zarka was also commenting that, which is very wise, that most of these urban solutions cannot come along, but they will need some activities with the citizens of environmental awareness campaigns or similar, so to work together with the citizens. And finally, another solution, which I think we said before, it was the establishment of industrial cities away from the city center, because as well, some of the municipalities were commenting that the problematics was like the high amount of dust in the air, the small particles. So yeah. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. No, very good points from everyone. So it's good to see that of course, and we know, but many of these solutions are being implemented already, and the idea is that for some of you who are not implementing some of the ones we're seeing today, for example, or other ones, and you find interesting and you didn't know about, then of course think about implementing them and including them in regulations and policy, and of course keep enhancing and promoting the other ones, or extending the application further, maybe into other sectors or in other areas that of the city that are not being implemented now. But yeah, definitely many problems, but also hopefully many solutions that can be implemented to solve this. Thank you, Gemma, for reading some of the comments that you are sharing with us. at the end, we can also have a little discussion again and talk more about all of these solutions that you are implementing and specifically, you know, the good results that you are obtaining from them. So other cities can also get inspired by that. Right, so here regarding this finance aspect of it, no? So just to very quickly talk about the cost effectiveness of nature-based solutions. So for example, green roofs, they can be cooler than typical roofs and reduce building air conditioning costs by up to 75%, some of them, depending on many variables, of course. But when all co-benefits are considered, and not only these, green roofs can actually provide benefits. Some studies have seen of $14 US per square foot than traditional roofs, no? And regarding tree cover, for example, we know that they can lower the surface temperatures by providing shade and through evapotranspiration, which can then reduce local summer temperatures. And a study has found that CTC benefits equivalent to up to $3 US for every $1 US invested in tree planting. Regarding sustainable drainage system, so some studies have also shown that the construction of these sustainable drainage systems might be up to 30% lower than traditional drainage systems, and also operational and maintenance costs are also generally lower for sustainable drainage systems. For example, 2 examples, the permeable or pervious pavements. These are made, as we have seen before, no, with porous concrete, and they allow water to filter through and into the soil instead of turning into runoff. So they can be up to 50% less expensive to install than traditional pavement, and they're actually generally cheaper to maintain as well. And regarding constructed wetlands, that one of you was saying before, so the treatment of wastewater, construction costs have also been seen in some cases to be 10 to 20% lower to construct a wetland, like a constructed wetland to treat the wastewater, compared to a conventional wastewater treatment plant. And they require also minimal maintenance. It can be as little as 1/20 of that of a conventional wastewater treatment plant. And also with low operation costs, since they are often only dependent on gravity flow. And the cost-benefit ratio of the solution, and in general many others, it appears to be even more favorable when benefits other than water purification in this case are taken into account. So it's even more favorable compared to traditional conventional systems. Here we have a table with a lot of numbers and signs. Basically was just, this is from a study where it's comparing the risk reduction performance and the costs of some structural solutions, in this case for coastal erosion and flooding, and also comparing to nature-based solutions. And basically we can see in the costs column that some of the nature-based solutions are actually cheaper than the structural ones. And again, let's remember that it's not only about the specific risk that is tackling, but all the other co-benefits that come with the nature-based solution that don't come with the structural ones. And therefore, you know, it's even cheaper, so to speak. Right, and now regarding the sources of finance, so where we can get the money to implement all of this. So there's many different sources where we can obtain funding or the finance to implement these solutions. And we have categorized a couple, like 2 categories. So we can implement, or you as a municipality can implement these nature-based solutions projects directly, or maintain existing ones directly, or you can do it through other actors and encourage other actors and stakeholders to implement these nature-based solutions. So, well, in this case, the sorry, I go back one slide. But in the first category, the municipality, you would pay for the intervention. So either through funds that you already have or obtaining loans and revenues to finance projects. And the indirect one, so through other actors like residents or utilities, the nature-based solutions will be implemented indirectly. And what you would do in this case, as we will see now, is to, for example, provide incentives to other stakeholders or stimulate private finance by other means. Just to clarify this, but to look into more detail with each of the specific cases. So the direct implementation or financing by you as a local municipality. First of all, you can use, we could call it innovative use of public budgets. This is basically pooling funding from different government departments or making use of previously untapped sources, for example, the public health budget or the urban planning department or transport or depending on how you're structured, of course. But just try to gather, funding from different areas within your local government. Then grant funding and donations, including EU, European Union funding, or grants from regional and national public bodies, philanthropic contributions, crowdfunding, and some examples here could be, for example, the European projects Horizon 2020 or the Life Climate Action, or some like the European Structural and Investment Funds, and also some other organizations like the Global Environmental Facility, etc. Then you can also directly obtain finance through instruments that generate revenue. This could be, for example, revenues from land sales or leases, or taxes or user fees, or voluntary contributions from beneficiaries, offsetting compensation systems. There's many different sources here that you can implement. And then also green finance, so loans from public or private financial institutions, green bonds, and yes, more like in the private, also public institutions in this case. And then regarding these more indirect financing sources or implementation, so you can use market-based instruments, so taxes or incentive rather than cost recovery mechanism or subsidies, or payments for ecosystem services, for example, which is something very, very new, but it could also be an option. Then, for example, developing business improvement districts. So this is business and other stakeholders that enter an agreement with local government to contribute an additional levy to finance improvements in a specific area. You can also set up endowments where a fund is established, and then through donation of property or money, land sales or developer contributions, you can also obtain finance in this way. Or create public and private partnerships, so long-term contracts between a private party and a government entity, for providing a public asset or service. So where the private party in this case is the one that bears the significant risk and management responsibility. Of revolving funds, or community asset transfers. Well, all of this is maybe it's a lot of information and it's very different or new ways of funding. We will also give you or send you a document where all of these types are more explained in detail, because now we don't have too much time to get into each of them. And there's also specific examples and cases of governments and local and regional governments that have implemented this type of partnerships or ways of financing. So hopefully it is more clear for you, because now I'm going through it a little bit fast, and hopefully you can get some inspiration from that. But yeah, then also just to mention the last two, the regulation and planning standards. For example, this is not really a financing instrument as such, even though we consider it here because you can actually really use it to implement these solutions. So this would be, for example, that you establish that new buildings in the inner city, or rehabilitations, they are required to, for example, leave a proportion of the area as green space or to have a green roof. So it's regulations that you can do. So technically, it's not really like financial, like obtaining finance. Right, and again, you will have all of this information in another document because we don't have too much time now to go through each of it. Finally, we just wanted to quickly mention these three specific actions that you can do. So for example, implement tax reductions or incentives for water saving and water reuse actions. In this case, both for the industry sector, for the domestic sector. So if residentials or an industry rehabilitate some part of the house or the building or the roof and implement some rainwater harvesting or does some grey water reuse, for example, it can be extent of paying some of the tax, specific tax annually. So this, helps them economically, of course, and helps the city to tackle water scarcity. The same can be done for energy efficiency and adaptation actions in buildings. So yes, again, so before we were talking about rainwater harvesting or water reuse, here it could be green roofs or improved isolation through window substitution, for example, to make the windows more efficient and improve the comfort, temperature comfort inside the building. And then you could also, if you don't have it already, maybe implement a municipal touristic tax. And this could be allocated, for example, to a fund for the execution. So the money collected from this tax or part of this touristic tax could be used to implement or execute some of these environmental actions in the municipality. Here, this is just a table from the Naturbation project. So in this project, they also assess different nature-based solution projects, basically to show you that the green dot that you see, which is the bigger one, means public local authorities budget, so that most of the nature-based solutions projects were implemented with the budget of the local authority. But of course, many other sources are also contemplated here. And finally, we wanted to also briefly talk about something that you have already let us know a lot in the chat, which is the communication with citizens and stakeholder involvement. So it is key to have, as you already said, it is key to have a broad stakeholder participation for the success of planning, implementation, and monitoring and maintenance of these nature-based solutions, and also other environmental management actions or strategies or policies. In order to further advance and bolster local leadership, you need to create a network and strengthen relations with many different stakeholders. So this for the success of this initiative. And it's important to recognize and let them know how important the roles of the citizens, civil society groups, and businesses are. Their vital role is key in implementing these nature-based solutions. So identify new opportunities. Also align your work with national and regional strategies. Work across your city. Find those who can champion and benefit from nature-based solutions and ask them about their opinion and how this should be done. And basically empower the people who can work with you and can help you in the implementation of these solutions. So for example, within your local government, bring in representatives from other sectors of your local government, such as education, as we've already mentioned, education, health, transportation, planning. Share visions and goals and educate each other and find ways to collaborate. It's important here, the inclusive narrative, so that you all have this common goal and the mission, because this is what can bridge knowledges and agendas across the different departments in your local government, and this is what can tackle possible departmental disputes that it's possible that you have. Hopefully not, but if you do, creating this inclusive narrative to inspire other colleagues and make them feel included is key. And of course, the inclusive narrative here has to be that the main objective is to tackle climate change and environmental pressures, and this can be done through nature-based solutions and other actions. And also communicate to politicians to create and increase support in many ways. They're also important they should know what are the impacts, what are the benefits, and include them also in all of these process. Then with citizens, so again, they have a key role. We've said it. You need to increase their knowledge of environmental problematics, ecosystem services, and the benefits, not only environmental, but also, of course, social and economic benefits of these nature-based solutions, and what are the benefits for them, and not only for the city. And they have to be informed and empowered, and also involved in some cases, or most of the cases, in the actions and in planning and implementing them. And when you're giving them the opportunity to express their opinions and raise their voices and share their concerns and suggestions, you also, as a municipality, obtain information that you didn't have before, and you would, of course, never know if you didn't ask. So in this case, we really suggest you and encourage you to organize training courses for the citizens and lectures, workshops to collect their inputs, their ideas, not only from citizens, but also from other stakeholders. And for example, a way of communicating is, for example, through infographics. Like here we see in the picture some examples, graphical, that they understand the problems, the solutions, what it's in for them. And also promote, you can promote education projects, and this sensibilization information can be done, for example, through projects in schools. These infographics can also be distributed through hospitals or medical centers, for example. And you can also communicate, of course, through local media, so radio, newspapers, TV, website. For example, in a city in Spain, they developed this online platform where they allowed more than 300, so it was allowed that at the end, 300 citizens took part on this survey that was covering a range of topics related to urban planning and social inclusiveness and ways to improve the city. And it had a very good response of what solutions they wanted the municipality to implement. Or in Bratislava and Prague, they also used some online tools like emotional maps, where the citizens expressed their opinion about how they felt in certain places. And this information was used by the municipality to plan and enhance planning efforts and results in different parts of the cities. And again, besides citizens, of course, involve community and civil society groups so that all parts of society is represented, especially the most vulnerable, so the ones that maybe don't have access to all of this information. Also engage with the private sector. They can actively contribute with funding, but also expertise or experience, support in the implementation of all of these solutions, and find innovative solutions to tackle urban risk and reduce tackle all of these environmental problems. And of course, also reach to, as I mentioned before, other governments, reach out to neighboring cities and for collaboration or just to learning from their experience and what has worked for them, but also what has not worked for them. So you can not replicate that or see how you can make it different. And also regional and national governments that can help you. Right, I think that was it from me. Hopefully you are still awake and it's not too much information, and hopefully yes, you got some of the important messages and concepts from this session today. Again, we will send you the slides in a more longer version, so you can read through it again if you want to. And now we again wanted to hear from you through the chat, or again, you can switch on your mic and let us know what is your experience with nature-based solutions, and which ones have worked to tackle some of the environmental impacts that you have, which ones not. You can also let us know the ones that didn't work, or recommendations for other municipalities, and what are the main benefits that you have obtained from implementing these measures. So yes, you can let us know. And let's see if I find the...
Sylvia, just in case,
Yes.
one of the interpreters is telling us that if you want to switch to an English channel, you have to exit the full screen, and then in the view options is where you can. In the meantime, does anyone would anyone like to speak, to share their experience about the threats, the opportunities, if they have implemented something similar, if they would like to? No one? I see one raised hand. Yeah. From Naval again. So yeah, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Gemma, right? Notes because...
Okay.
Justement, c'est une remarque, c'est le choix des plantes et le choix des végétations qu'on utilise dans les espaces verts. Il est très intéressant. Nous sommes en Tunisie, nous sommes, disons, tous les témoins rouges de l'eau sont allumés. Donc, si on choisit des espèces qui consomment trop d'eau, donc on n'arrive pas à les entretenir. Juste c'est pour ouvrir la discussion. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Sylvia, the comment is about again, it's very adequate about the choice of plants when planning the use of nature-based solutions. So in Tunisia, or as in many of the Mediterranean countries, or all of them, they have all the alarms about water scarcity. So this has to be a factor to take into account, no? Because if you use the plant species that that need a lot of water, that consume a lot of water, obviously this is not a solution that's going to work, because they are going to die, or they are going to take water from other uses. So Mr. 𝐵𝐵 was wanted to open the debate and see what we thought about this.
Yeah, no, definitely. That is the thing. Nature-based solutions, of course, have many co-benefits. But if used adequately and designed adequately and correctly, because as you were mentioning, if we use some species that are not adapted to our own local climatic conditions and also to adapt it to the soil and our own region and particularities, it can be totally detrimental and in some cases even cause the opposite effect that we wanted, or cause problems in other areas, as you were mentioning. So consume too much water, or of course, increase maybe it can solve one problem, but then it can drag or increase the number of pests, no, of indigenous species that grow there or that come. So definitely this has to be studied carefully depending on the area. I don't know if anyone here has had good or bad experiences in this case. Maybe planting not too adapted species for the local climate and then having environmental problems, or the other way. I don't know.
Maybe I would also add here about in this sense how important it is not to plan ahead the species that are going to be planted, and also what you were mentioning about the coordination between different departments of the municipality, because in this case, for example, if there are urban planners that would design the nature-based solutions, so they would have to speak with the environmental department to select the species and so on. So this could be very beneficial. We have one comment from 𝐵𝐸𝐺 municipality. They say that they have implemented some of these solutions. They are using solar panels in some municipality building, which is very interesting. We will speak about solar panels in another of the, as you know, these are 4 training sessions. So in the energy training session, we will speak about this. And we have another hand raised from the Navel commune. If you want to speak, you can unmute yourself. Or I can try. Maybe.
Oui, bonjour. Oui.
Yeah, we can hear you.
𝐸𝐵𝐺, architecte de la ville de Navel. Justement, je vais intervenir pour échanger un petit peu et partager notre expérience qui concerne le tri sélectif, c'est-à-dire à Navel. Il y avait un projet qui s'appelle 𝐸𝐫𝐞𝐞𝐧. Et là, c'était l'idée de faire avec les chiffonniers, de collecter donc le déchet plastique, et d'essayer par la suite donc de le revaloriser. Ça, c'est une première expérience qui touche donc la composante environnement. Et aussi pour la collecte d'eau pluviale, la tradition de collecter l'eau à travers 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐻. 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐻, c'est sorte de, on appelle ça 𝐕𝐞𝐫𝐻, c'est la sorte comme un puits. Mais il est un petit peu spécifique, il est traditionnel, et donc la collecte d'eau se fait dans tous les ménages, dans toutes les maisons, et c'est traditionnel, et en fait l'eau elle est récupérée, elle est utilisée, que ce soit donc pour le nettoyage, pour l'irrigation des jardins. C'est une tradition qui se fait dans les maisons, et dans la municipalité on est en train de mener même dans la révision de nos plans stratégiques et nos plans d'aménagement urbain, d'essayer de répliquer ça même sur les promoteurs immobiliers, c'est-à-dire dans les grands bâtiments, dans les opérations de promotion immobilière. Voilà, merci.
Thank you. Well, just very quickly, I translate to Silvia. So Navel is sorry, I don't have your name because it doesn't appear. She's an architect of the commune of Navel, and she was explaining that they have this collection. Well, they have 2 different projects, very interesting. One about reuse of plastic, and another one about the wells. Which is similar to what was commented before. So wells to collect the water, but this time instead of agricultural purposes is in the houses, in the households. So again, the importance of urban planning from this traditional system, now the community wants to include it in the urban planning, in their strategy to replicate it in bigger buildings. So this is very interesting, and for sure it can be an example to other municipalities.
Yes, definitely, exactly. Including it into planning and regulation can, of course, help scaling up all of these projects and solutions, and of course have a bigger effect in this sense. So very interesting. Thank you.
So I don't know if there is anything else, or we can go to wrapping up. And
yes, I don't know if I unzoomed my screen. 1 second.
Silvia, if you have any conclusions, or if not.
Yes, no, I just had like one last slide, which was what is the main message or conclusions that you have learned today. If you also need that clarification of any topics, it's a lot of information that we have given you today. especially for some of you who had not that much knowledge of some of these solutions. But again, we will definitely send you this material so you can look through it again, and any other questions that you might have, we will also, we're here to help you. And in the next sessions, we can also talk about any other questions that you have, or we can talk about your experiences as well in the next session, and specific case studies that will hopefully also make it a bit more real. So seeing some cities implementing specific projects might inspire you implementing solutions in your municipalities. And all of these aspects that we are talking about now, which it's probably one of the key messages also of today, besides the specific solutions, but the collaboration between stakeholders, the involvement of citizens and other stakeholders, and communication within your own local government, which sometimes seems so irrelevant, but it is important. So we will also see all of these implemented in a practical way in the next session, so next Tuesday, with the specific case studies and examples of cities that have worked with all of these, and again, hopefully can inspire you in some aspects to do the same, or follow similar implementation methods as they have, because they have been quite successful in their own cities. So that was it from me. I think it was it's enough already from me. But yeah, thank you for being here, for attending, for your contributions, and from my side, see you next week again.
Yeah, as you all know, and Silvia said, this is part of 3 sessions, so you have all the information in your email. Remember that the Zoom link of the next session is different, so well, you have everything in the agenda. And if you have any doubt or whatever, you can contact MedCities at any time, and we will be very happy to help. We hope you have enjoyed, and see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone. See you.
Thank you.
Merci, au revoir.
Thank you. Allez, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir à tous.